Okay. Hi, guys. How are we? Great. Good. Thumbs up. I'm good. So it was great meeting on Tuesday, getting a little bit of our thoughts flowing about paleontology. So one thing I didn't get to on Tuesday was kind of like introducing you guys to like what the structure of this class is going to be. And I'm actually not even going to do that right now. But one of the things that I will tell you is that this class is definitely going to be kind of a walk through time and sort of like trying to understand the different lines of evidence we have to come to grips with like the world around us, how it got to be the way it is, kind of where all these things come from, how the organisms, certainly the vertebrate organisms, are related. And so today, before we sort of start, which is what we're going to do next week, is kind of start that walk through time, is kind of get this like what I think of as like a grab bag of like important ideas I hope you can jump on board with. Some of these ideas come from geology, some of them come from chemistry, some of them come from biology, so they'll be very familiar to you. But paleontology is like really inherently like an interdisciplinary science. You kind of have to be comfortable with like a lot of different pieces of things or things that you like half remember from intro chem that will help you contextualize the paleo thing that I actually want to talk about. And so paleontology as a class is almost always like this one is like kind of a high division class because it's like you kind of need to know 70 things before we tell you about T-Rex, because otherwise, why would you trust what I'm saying about T-Rex? And so fossils, rocks, time, I would say that's like not much of a title. It's kind of a list of stuff that we're going to try to start talking about today. Our title slide here are some beautiful badlands down in Arizona. That's in a place called Petrified Forest. You can go there. There's a bunch of fossilized trees and many, many other things. And when you see that, places like this, on like a national park website, they're called things like the Painted Desert. Beautiful places. They're not always beautiful. But all those horizontal stripes you're seeing are different layers of rock that were deposited one on top of each other. The colors mean things. You might imagine there's different minerals, different molecules, different chemistry in each one of those layers. Each one of those layers is preserving potentially a different kind of environment. And so therefore you could expect to find different fossils maybe in each of those layers. And of course, the people who work at Petrified Forest National Park work those layers and can show you this is when this area of the world was actually swampy. And then the red stuff way up at the top is when it was a lot drier. And there's different animals, different plants within those layers. And so this is very beautiful. And if you've never been to Petrified Forest, you should go to Petrified Forest. But this image is a good example of like what you can see out in the real world today. And what I hope as we keep going through this class, you guys will understand that a place like this, when you see it, when you're driving along on the highway, if you can, park your car and run over there because like that's a little insight into some ancient world when you see stuff like this. And maybe not as beautiful as this or as colorful as this, but what we call rocky outcrops, exposures of fossiliferous rocks are everywhere. There's some right here in Idaho. This is just a particularly beautiful one from Arizona. And so there's a lot of places we could start. Like I said, today's sort of wild in the sense that there's just a whole bunch of big ideas I want to talk to you about. So let's start with the first one I want to talk about, which is rocks. Some of you are geo majors or have geo backgrounds. The rock cycle. So I have one slide on the rock cycle for you guys. I'm calling it Rock Cycle 101. There's a nice little figure that has a bunch of arrows on it and a bunch of words. You are not responsible necessarily for like knowing all the details of this. I don't care about that, but it's an important part of our planet's structure that I think you should know about. And I'll contextualize it within paleontology here in a second. So just like always, first thing I'm going to have you do, take the time with your neighbors, talk about this cycle, read the words, say, I don't know what that word means. Do you know what that word means? And let's see if together we can get there in terms of understanding generally, quote unquote, the rock cycle. So go ahead and talk to your neighbors, and we'll come back in a second. Those things happen.
geologist even deeper and it's needed. Some of that on the inside and on the outside, it's the yes. Like some more better off, it makes sense. Yes. Okay, that's some really deep stuff, so I don't know that happens. Yeah, maybe okay. It's on the 7th. Yeah, like it's not nice. So. That's great. Stuff. Yeah, the difference in such too, that is ground so, or maybe I need it exactly. Like I think it's gonna be, yeah, it's like put together. More something it is. Less.
All right, can I get some observations or questions, or what are you guys feeling cool with? Yeah, Brooklyn.
So there at metamorphic rock, it's got an arrow that goes right back to itself, saying burial. Like,
yeah.
What is burial if it's already underneath the Earth's surface?
Oh, that's fun. I think yeah, that's interesting. I'm assuming that would be referring to metamorphic rock that forms under the Earth's surface, and then once again somehow is like heated up and like maybe burial's the wrong word there, because it remains under the Earth's surface the whole time. But metamorphic rock of one kind or another can also get metamorphosed again. Am I right to say that? Deep underground. I'm asked the geologist. Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify something. So when you go from a sedimentary rock to a metamorphic rock,
right,
it changes the physical orientation of what makes up the rock, but like it's still the same kind of thing, right? It's switched around a little bit due to heat and pressure.
Any geo people feel like you would be able to say something to that? I don't want to put you on the spot. We got a couple geo people in the house.
Sorry, I asked a hard question.
No, well, wait. Before you answer that, maybe a thing that I care about you guys as a class taking away from the rock cycle here. Maybe you've heard this before. 3 types of rocks, right? There's a water cycle, a rock cycle. Igneous rock, usually volcanic rock. Metamorphic rock, rock that's been altered because of really intense pressure and temperature under the surface. And sedimentary rock, which are rocks that form from like sediments getting cemented together. A bunch of sand getting hardened into a sandstone. Sedimentary, igneous, metamorphic are the 3 big categories, but those are sort of like just what I said, categories. And what I think is important for you guys to see is there's arrows that will let any of these rocks, this means up on the surface, like black rock around a volcano, craters of the moon. This is like a volcanic structure underground still, right? But still 2 igneous things here. Igneous, metamorphic, and sedimentary, there's a way for all of them to turn into all the other ones. That's what's important to me as one of the points you guys take home, right? Just because you're this or that type of rock doesn't mean that eventually you're not going to become some other kind of rock. Does that make sense? And rocks are like an idea that we humans have. We could be talking about a carbon atom that moves through this whole cycle the whole time, and the whole time it's still a carbon atom, right? There's different molecules, there's different crystal structures. There's a lot of layers to this sort of taxonomy of talking about the Earth. But this is a very nice sort of like big picture human scale way to be thinking about this. Certainly Trevor's asking about like, if you have, sand become a sandstone and that sandstone gets buried and it goes down deep somehow, it'll get turned into a metamorphic rock. It's still probably a lot of the same material that was the sandstone, but I think it becomes different. Well, I don't know what we'd say, crystalline structures or the way that compounds interact becomes different. What would you guys, I don't want to put you on the spot. So, you can just say, I don't know, but I'm curious how you talk about this because I'll be fully honest with you guys, say this is a little bit outside my personal wheelhouse, but I know about what I need to know about it. Yes. Yes.
recrystallize your igneous territory.
Yes.
So it has to be the same stuff in the metamorphic rock, which is gets.
So a volcanic rock or a sedimentary rock or a metamorphic rock, one way or another, gets reburied and reheated. You're still the same stuff, but you've now been changed somehow. And what would you call that somehow again? Yeah, it gets really technical, right? But here's what's important. If you fully melt, if your like crystal structure dissociates into like underground lava, aka magma, then when it cools down again, you are something else. You're a different kind of volcanic rock now. And so the whole point of this that I really care for you guys is there's underground pieces and above ground pieces. Metamorphic rock, igneous rock, and sediments can all be outcrop, uplift, 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 which just means they're visible on the surface. There's sedimentary structures you guys can see right now. There's igneous structures you guys can see right now. There's metamorphic structures you can see right now. If you go to the Tetons, you can see all three so easily. All of them will erode into like grit in a river. Most of that will end up as a sedimentary rock somewhere out in Wyoming or in Idaho if it came off the Tetons, right? And then once it gets buried, blah, blah, blah. What I care about you guys thinking about is that there's a cycle to the Earth's geological processes, and that's pretty much all I'm going to say about that. Any other questions? Or like, I don't want to get distracted too hard on this. But this gives you some context. I think these are kind of fun things for you guys to think about. Igneous rocks, so like one of these big categories of like the Earth's surface, the Earth's crust is what we should really be thinking about. Only about 15% of the surface of continents, like think about like a satellite looking down on the continents, continental surfaces, only about 15% of that is igneous. But most of the total crust, like all the actual foundations of the ocean crust, is what we would call igneous rock, like the bedrock of the oceans. Metamorphic rock, so rocks that are altered under heat or pressure, like marble or something like that. 12%, mostly in mountain ranges, is metamorphic rock. Whereas sedimentary rocks form a humongous amount of the continental surfaces. And it can be made of organic sediments, or it can be, sediments cemented together, something like an example here, sand into sandstone, but also organic materials that get formed into rocks count as a kind of sedimentary rock. If you bury enough plants and heat them up, you have this like coal or like a limestone from the bodies of like corals or things like that. There's ways to build up organic material in the form of these like sedimentary rocks. In terms of the continents, a huge percentage of the continental surfaces are these sedimentary rocks. And this is just a really, really, really overly simplified picture of the Earth's crust. You guys have all seen pictures like this before. You have this like sort of solid, sort of viscous mantle. It's not really like bubbling lava, right? It's way down there. It's all covered up. Oceanic crust and continental crust are different from each other. I said, I think on Tuesday as a mistake that like continental crust is lighter than oceanic crust. What I really should have said is that it's like less dense. So it might be weighing more, but it is in some places on the surface. For the most part, continental crust is less dense than oceanic crust. And that's why when the plates come together, it's usually the ocean one that goes under the continent one. And then continents end up having mountains on the edges, and the ocean goes down and the volcanoes go after all that. We're not going to be talking about all those things. And like you said, I'm not a geologist, so I'd be really sort of ill-advised for you to listen to me too carefully at this stage. But what I care about is that we're going to talk about fossils, and fossils come from sedimentary rocks, and sedimentary rocks are mostly on the continents, and sedimentary rocks are part of this bigger picture. Are we cool? Like I said, today's a real grab bag kind of nightmare situation, but all right. Fossils are nearly, you can imagine there's fun examples here. Can you think about what those examples might be? Nearly always in sedimentary rocks. We'll talk about that a little later. Another question you guys are going to have, and another foundational principle of this class, is time. And most of the time that scientists can talk about with authority when it comes to fossils is from the ages of rocks. Very, 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 very rarely is like a fossil itself able to be like dated. This dinosaur tooth has a date. Usually it's the rocks around the dinosaur tooth that has a date. And so there's two ways scientists, geologists, paleontologists can talk to each other about how old something is. One way is called absolute dating. That means getting like a real scientific estimate, usually with some error bars, on exactly how old this specific thing really actually is. The other kind of dating we'll talk about in a second is relative dating. Maybe you don't know exactly how old this thing is, but you can talk about if it's younger or older than something else. So you know its date relative to something. So what's the difference between absolute dating and relative dating? Well, it's bolded right now on this slide. Absolute dating is almost always something that we're going to get because it's derived from chemistry. You guys know what isotopes are? What's an isotope? Carbon, what's an isotope?
It's a molecule that has it's the same element, so it has the same number of protons, but it'll have different weights because there's different number of neutrons.
Any agree, disagree on that? I'm gonna say an atom instead of a molecule. No, exactly, right? This is all technical, silly. It's not that silly because it's really important, but like it's all stuff that you're like, oh, I haven't thought about that in a long time. So a carbon atom is a carbon atom because it has a certain number of protons, a certain number of electrons. You can have a carbon atom, though, that has extra neutrons. You might have heard of carbon-13 or carbon-14. Chemically, it still behaves exactly like a normal carbon atom because the protons and the electrons are the same. So its electromagnetic interactions are the same. But it's a little bit heavier because it's got extra neutrons that are like inert when it comes to charge. Carbon-14 exists, carbon-13 exists in certain abundances all over the world. And because of the way that atoms get used in biological processes, we're going to talk about this later in class, you actually kind of accrue higher percentages relative to the natural world of like heavier carbons or lighter carbons. And that's true for all the atoms in different organic systems. So isotopes end up being something that are really, really, really important to helping really clever scientists start to figure out how we can ask questions of things like rocks. Well, let's talk about this. You guys have heard about isotopes. Everyone has heard about isotopes, right? And this, are you all refreshed now? You're like, all right, it's the same atom, but more neutrons, so it's heavier. Okay. When there is a magma chamber, when there's melted rock, when it's like totally free and you're like mixing everything back together again, there are no crystal structures, there's nothing happening. It's just like a soupy mess of rocks. You can have something like an eruption on the surface. This is a beautiful picture of a volcanic eruption. There's all that beautiful, fun lava streaming down the side of that volcano. That volcano will cool into some kind of like igneous rock. So here's this rock. There's minerals of all different kinds, different abundances of these like mineral structures within that rock. In volcanic rocks, one of those mineral types that'll distill out, we call a zircon. So a zircon is this mineral crystal within a bigger thing we'd call a rock that is cooled from this volcanic eruption. This volcanic eruption, because everything was melted and mixed all up, once this crystal hardens, you can kind of think of it like ice, like freezing. Once it becomes like and locked in, within it are going to be a set number of maybe carbon atoms. And if we pull out those carbon atoms, we can see how many are of the weird isotopes and how many are of the normal amount that uranium or carbon, normal amount of neutrons they're supposed to have. So you can imagine that this zircon crystal that forms as this rock cools, as soon as it cools, kind of starts to act like a countdown clock for those ratios of isotopes. So what I'm talking about there is this other physics and chemistry concept you guys maybe heard about called radioactive decay. It doesn't matter the absolute number of, let's just say, uranium. It doesn't matter the absolute number of uranium atoms that were in that crystal. But what matters is as soon as that crystal goes and becomes solid, some at a random but ultimately knowable rate of those isotopes are going to, we say, decay into a more stable form of uranium. And so you can take, at time point 0, you will have no daughter isotopes. You'll have a lot of parent isotopes, meaning like, you know, not the normal amount of, or not the isotope that's not the usual kind of, let's say, uranium. And immediately you'll start to have a decay. And so what I'd like to have you guys do again, you might not really know what I'm talking about right now. That's also okay. Talk to each other and just like make some interpretations here. You can look at a line graph with 2 lines on it and see what it's trying to tell you. So just try to make some interpretations, and then we'll talk about it. Go ahead and do that.
Okay, so yeah, so Atlas and Atlas 2, half of the north is London is there, and that like 3 half that's Florida is London. So that makes sense. So Okay, so you know how long? What? Well, then that happens. So. You would know it's pretty gross. Yes, that is exactly. That's. To say that's like it's right. Yeah, it's not it's a butterfly. Like say you're analyzing whatever some say right. Fine, it's like it's 17% longer and longer. It's I guess to yeah. And that's the right term. It's good enough.
Anybody feel like they could tell the rest of us like what they're taking away from this chart? I heard some good stuff. I heard you guys talking about the real things. Yeah, Ethan.
It looks like with each half-life, half of the parent.
Well, how about this? What's a half-life, do you think?
I don't know how to define half.
Well, how about this? Whatever one means, at one, you're 50-50. So whatever your weird uranium, let's say, or weird something else that started in that crystal, whatever one means, by one of them, half of them have become something else and half of them are still what they were at the beginning. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. And then with each half-life, half of that amount is remaining. So half-life 2, 25%, half-life 3, half of that 25%, so 12.5.
Half of 100, 50. Another half of 50 is 25 compared to what was originally the ratio, the number, right? 12.5. You have this asymptote that goes on for a while, right? Does that make sense to people? Well, what else? Anything else people are saying about this? Yeah,
Question. So like
yeah.
more time that goes on, the less accurate this is, right? Because maybe like
Well, certainly the more refined your measurements would really need to be, because you're going to start to get incredibly tiny fractions, right? And this is about ratios, right? This is about 50-50, 75-25, ratios of a certain kind of isotope to another kind of isotope. Doesn't matter if there's a trillion in there or like 48, it's about the ratio between them. And so depending on how small your sample is or how good your instruments are doing the science, it'll be very difficult once you get a lot of half-lives back here to lose your thing. Does that make sense? Did you have something else for them?
Yeah, I was just saying, you can measure the ratio of the daughter isotope to the parent isotope, and you know the half-life of the parent isotope. You can then.
So you have to know the half-life of whatever your isotope is for this to be interesting at all, right? Thankfully, nuclear physicists have done all this. I don't know anything about it. Don't you dare ask me because I don't know off the top of my head how they did it. But for instance, a lead isotope, here's lead-212 up there, at a very predictable rate that nuclear physicists have figured out, it will decay into this, and end up back as this lead-208 type isotope. So a lead-208 and a lead-212 will have a relationship that nuclear physicists, not paleontologists, not geologists, have like figured out. And so to give you guys an example, uranium-238 decays into what we would call lead, uranium to lead, so there is a change in what the atom is, 206, and it takes about 4.47 billion years for half of your uranium to decay into lead. A different uranium, uranium-235, will decay into lead-207. Don't these seem so close? Guess what? That happens only 710 million years to do half of it. These numbers aren't supposed to be like all that impressive to you, but the point is like, look how different these numbers are. 4.47 billion, 0.7 billion, to have that uranium devolve into that, or decay into that lead, that uranium devolve into, or decay into that lead. And so the point is that for every kind of isotope out there that we can do this for, nuclear physicists have like figured out what those half-lives are. You guys have all heard of carbon dating, I assume? Oh, we found something in ancient Egypt. We carbon dated it. It's 4,300 years old. Cleopatra, this or that. Carbon 13, carbon 14 decays hilariously fast. The half-life of carbon isotopes is like 4,000 some years. So like what you asked about, if you do half-lives of carbon, carbon stops being at all helpful at like 40-ish, 45,000 years ago. So carbon dating is really cool for archaeology. You're not going to see it in paleo because almost everything is too old for carbon to work. So for us, people who care about rocks, uranium is really popular, strontium is really popular. If you care about stars and galaxies and stuff, you probably use completely different isotopes. It's kind of about these different time scales. So you can imagine the robust time scale here. The half-life of this uranium is like pretty much as old as the Earth. So, you know, pretty fine to get a crystal that's as old as the Earth and be able to date it if you use those isotopes to try to do it. Which is really cool, right? Again, chemistry always blows me away, and I'm always like walking on the shoulders of giants and like, let's talk about something else. But I want you guys to see this because it's really important. The other way we're going to be able to talk about how old things are in this class, besides absolute dating, which again almost always comes from volcanic rocks, is relative dating. And so here's a nice little scheme for you guys. I got these nice emojis of some volcanic rock, and then this orange rock that has shells in it, and then another volcanic rock, and then this blue rock that has a bone in it. MA is mega annum. You're going to see that a lot in this class. It means like a million years. So 7 million years old, 3 million years old. This is just a little cartoon I'm making up here, right? Do me a favor, talk to your neighbors. What can you say about those shells, and what can you say about that bone in terms of how old they are? This isn't a trick question. Talk to your neighbors.
Yeah, so you just said it, so here's in between this. It's also. And that means some of there's been bigger. And it's just plus the best. Problem. Yeah.
Okay, so like Indigo Brandon, how old are the shells? People like in between 3 and 7 million years? 6.784, 4.381. I don't know. Between 7 and 3. How old's the bone? Yeah, go ahead.
So, assuming that there isn't any disconformities or anything, and there's not any like intrusions or something like that.
We can do that on my cartoon.
Those laws of position say
Yes.
the bottom rocks are older and the ones up higher.
I didn't say that, but that is a true thing that we always kind of assume is that like the layers on the bottom are older because they get laid down on top of each other. So I didn't say that, but you're right, Trevor. Older, younger. How old's the bone?
I would say it's younger than the shells, just based on.
Yes, how old?
Not good with numbers.
Not good with numbers. 1.5. Certainly we can all agree it's less than 3, right? And that's it. This is a good example of the kind of uncertainties we all kind of have to deal with sometimes when we're talking about fossils. Sometimes it's really, really, really amazing how precisely we know something. And I will tell you guys, you're going to see this a lot in this class where we're like, how old is that cool thing? And I'll be like, maybe 255, maybe 251. Somewhere in there. And that is like the 2026, that's what we can do. Okay, yeah.
We were just having a conversation that like a couple million years, like that's pretty accurate if you get within, 5 million years or so.
Hey,
considering that the Earth is a billion years old.
There's billions of years of Earth history. If you can get to a couple million, maybe you think that's great. I think it's great, but you guys are also welcome to be like, that sucks. That's terrible. That's so good. Let's keep learning more and doing more. So here's a good example though. Almost never on the surface of this planet are you going to get one outcrop, one hillside that has a volcanic layer and a volcanic layer with 2 sedimentary layers in between it. By the way, walk around Pocatello. If you go up into the hills, you will see stuff like this everywhere. And so if you date the 2 volcanoes, 7 and 3, this is between 7 and 3, this is less than 3, but I don't know. That's all I can say. What's nice though is you can go to the next hill and the next hill and the next hill and the next hill and just keep making observations, right? And so relative dating is kind of this like continually evolving, constantly improving way of getting at how old stuff probably is. So if you guys came with me in a van and we saw this, and then we got in the same van and went to another hill, we could see this. Ooh. Okay, same question, talk to each other. How old are the shells? How old is the bone? Now you have 2 hillsides with the same fossils. Okay.
Let's say that. So all of us, we show well, yes. Yes, this is gas size. On that you go, so you're. I don't know, somewhere. Right, maybe that, what's that? Yeah, it's a lot. He said, yeah.
So maybe what I'll ask you guys to do then, if taking this in for a second, is like, what are you now able to say about the bone? And do the two hills agree with each other, yes or no? Okay, have that conversation.
So now part like a layer of business. Yeah, shells.
All right, so what did we learn about the age of the bone when we went to the new hillside? It's a different bone in the sense of like, we have two of them now, but like, let's say it's the same bone, meaning like, oh, it's also an elephant femur that looks identical. So what do we learn about this bone's age, this hillside? I see you, but yeah.
So maybe a little bit more accuracy that it's between 2.1 million years old. Like that.
Okay, do people agree that this bone on this hill is between 2.1 and 0.9 million in its age? Is that comfortable to people? Does that agree with what we already saw on the first hill? Yes or no? Talk to each other. The first hill told you it's younger than 3. The second hill says between 2.1 and 0.9. That's younger than 3. So I would say for the bone, we have a little bit of like a precision increase. Not great. Right? By the way, I made this up in PowerPoint. I just threw it. It's all made up, but it helps you go the principle, right? Okay, the shells are weirder. Same thing. What have we learned about these shells and whatever the orange rock is they occur in based on the second place? So go ahead and talk to each other. What do we learn about the shells? And did what we learned about the shells disagree or complement what we already learned on the first hill? Okay, talk to each other about that.
What about the lower? We had so you want them point line on the we've already the great things. Yes. So 2.1 is yeah. So they don't want to be getting us saying error. So there's no place on it. So we can't sell that, but less than 7.1 person. So yeah, this was a technical phrase. There are systems, yeah. There's like there's I think the right extension is later.
All right, how do we feel about the on the second hill only? On the second hill only, how do we feel about the age of the shells? What can we say? Yes.
We're saying if we're assuming that they're the same species.
Yeah. I only had emoji. I mean, I could have been really specific and shown you photos, but I just did emojis. Assume it's the same snail. Okay, go ahead.
That it's between 2.1 and 4 million years old.
So between 2.1 and 4 million years old, we have a little extra bonus in here. Maybe that doesn't matter. I don't know. Between 2.1 and 4, people agree with that? Does that agree or disagree with the first place? Yeah.
For the bottom shell, it agrees or with the
Along the left side.
This one in particular is somewhere between 3.8 and 4, so like 3.9-ish maybe, right? And what were you about to say?
Well, and then, but the top one is agree.
So you're saying, well, just I'm trying to just be really over the top with this. 3.9 definitely gets to be between 3 and 7, right? And then this one, it's younger than 3.8, not younger than 2.1. Does that disagree or agree with this? Partially, what do you mean by partially? Who said partially?
Well, that shell could be older than 3, which would match the first one.
Nothing is saying that this shell is as young as 2.1. You have a limit here of 2.1. We have a limit over here of 3. If you're assuming they're the same. So it's like they can go complement each other. And so maybe what you guys could say is, all I know is these two hillsides. I would say this shell, this snail, I'm gonna call it a snail. This snail is between 3 and 4 million years old if I put these together. Whereas I'm gonna say this bone is 1 something, probably million years old. Does that make sense? This is a really, like I said, I just made this up as an idea so you guys could like kind of go like this a little bit. And like isotopes give you absolute ages. They can help us get volcanic ashes and lavas and things like that dated. And then there's layers of sedimentary rock full of fossils in between usually. And we have to do that a lot of different places to build up this like scheme that seems to be internally consistent. That's the big take home I wanted you to have. Yeah.
So we're like dating or looking at fossils, most of it is relative dating and rather than absolute dating.
I've never in the world heard of somebody like picking up a T-Rex bone, breaking off a piece of it, and telling you how old it is. That's not what happens. There's layers of ashes and things like that, and then T-Rex is in between. And it's really, really good because we do this 1,000 times. And so I can tell you exactly how old I'm pretty 100% sure T-Rex is. But none of those dates came from like a T-Rex tooth or a T-Rex bone. And that's news, right? If you're young enough, 50,000 years or younger, we can take the carbon out of that mammoth and be like, this elephant is 17,438 years old. But that's only for really recent stuff. Does that make sense? So these are fun things to think about, right? How old are things? And this is going to be something that I think will come up all the time. All throughout this class, I'm going to be sharing with you guys the evidence we have for different interesting phenomena, different interesting evolutionary or ecological things. Sometimes it'll be really obvious what the absolute dates are. Sometimes it'll be relative dating. And you're going to see a lot of applied examples of this little silly thing I just had you do. But I wanted you to kind of get a little crash course in it. So what are rocks? How do we know how old rocks are? The next thing I want to talk about is like fossils at all. This is vertebrate paleontology. So again, remember I said we're going to switch gears a bunch this lecture? This lecture is kind of crazy. This is what I'm talking about. Forget rocks. Delete them. Okay. Here's something. You could go somewhere in the world. You could probably walk there if you had enough time and see this animal walking around. If you're a biologist, really let yourself take a deep breath for this one and talk to your neighbors. What are the things you could know about this animal that's alive right now? Obviously, there's a lot. Chat with each other. What's knowable about this iguana?
It's got T-Rex. Yeah. No. I guess we could know about the existence. Yeah. Talking about what's knowable, like just from looking at this photo?
No.
From observing the
Anything you could ever do.
Okay, so.
All right, I really trust that you guys are functioning people and have thought of stuff. So like, let's just go around. What are some things that are knowable and about this? Oh, it's got bones. You might find a dead one. You could kill one, I guess, cut it open. You know it's got bones. Great, it's got bones. I'm gonna say anatomy. What else? Trevor, yeah.
I noticed that it has like these digits on its hands that like almost. Based on the picture, seem like adapted for like holding onto the tree branch and helping the lizard support.
You might be able to see that its toes look like it can hold onto a tree. What else can you see? It is in a tree.
That is true. It is in a tree.
You can see its habitat. What about you guys?
Color.
What color is that animal? What else? You here in the front. What else?
It's got scales.
Ready? It's integument. It's outer covering, hair, feathers, fur, scales, whatever. It's got scales. Okay. What else?
We talked about behavior,
Whoa, what kind of behavior would you be able to see?
how it interacts with the environment and other things.
What's maybe a couple examples of a way it interacts with environment or other members?
Like, can it climb a tree?
Okay, so like how it locomotes? Anything else people think of? What else?
Eating.
What about you guys?
I just said very broadly, the phenotype and genotype, given enough study.
You definitely can just pick up its phenotype. And you also could be like, it takes a little bit of blood. And you could definitely very easily get the individual's genotype. You could do it a couple thousand times to a couple thousand iguanas. You could talk about population ecology. You could talk about bacterial resistance and viral resistance and immunities and okay, what else?
I brought up something else kind of interesting, because the bird related is to fossils, can't really see.
I wonder if we will.
Like,
Sorry.
yeah.
No, say don't.
You can like dissect it, look at like specific organs and stuff like that. I know you already brought up anatomy. But
Yeah, but that's okay.
yeah,
I think I hear what you're saying. So the soft tissues, right?
yeah.
What is this thing's kidney function?
Does it have?
How big is its brain? What kind of optical adaptations does it have to be nocturnal or something, maybe? That's all soft tissue. Okay, of course, you're correct. This is the world we're going to be living in. So, talk to each other. You can use this as a guide. You can use this as a guide, but go ahead and spend a few minutes here. I think that's a pretty killer fossil lizard, but it's kind of different than an iguana in Costa Rica. So what's notable about this animal? Chat it up.
Fossils, and why would we have fossil there? Also, even when the that's special. As I kind of talk back by the it's my guess. It's a super. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah, that's Paul. It's they have some kind of angular house like. Maybe there's some maybe it's some bigger terrors like bar maybe there's. Yeah, that's it looks like a nice, you know, I guess it's sort of like just a state. We can also, it's small cells. And that they're also there. Yeah.
All right, so what are some things that we could say we are knowable? You might have to do a lot of research, but like you can get after it. What are some things we can know? Yeah. So, okay, so you are saying we could make inferences. We cannot watch this thing eat a mango, whereas the iguana would be like, You'd be like, oh, cool, they eat fruit. But this thing, we could make inferences about diet. And how would we do that again?
With the.
So maybe the teeth structure characteristics, the jaw structure characteristics. I'm gonna say that's anatomy focus. Any other ways we could get after diet? Yeah.
Size of the organism,
And what would that tell us?
I mean.
Well, that's a knowable thing you're saying.
Well, same with the diet though, if they're huge, they're gonna eat big things, if they're small, they're gonna eat small things.
Potentially.
We love that sentence. Do we not love that sentence?
Yeah, they say right. Okay, good. Whales do be small things.
Isn't that funny? The bigger you are, the smaller the things you eat. Oh, but I eat a trillion of them. Oh, I see. So these are fun, right? This is why we're doing this. I like this. So I think something that's knowable for certain. I'm very comfortable. I can tell you like the snout vent length of the iguana. Pretty sure I can tell you the snout vent length of that lizard too. I know how big that lizard is. Does size have something to do with diet? Yeah. Especially if you're certain kinds of ecologies. If you're a hypercarnivore, definitely. Any other ways we can get after diet you guys can think of? Yeah, Carmen?
We're really lucky on our gut content.
Yeah, sometimes the fossil's got a fish in the ribcage and you're like, nice, you eat fish. That's cool. So sometimes there's like gut contents. I'm not asking you guys to really try to think of all these different things. I really want to stick to what's knowable. So size, we can make an inference on diet. We don't really get to know, unfortunately. I wasn't joking on Tuesday when I said, I have never, ever seen a T-Rex eat meat. And neither of you. Super comfortable with the inference. But it is fair to say no one's seen a T-Rex shred something. Now, are there T-Rex teeth deeply embedded in the bone of herbivorous dinosaurs? Yep. Good. That agrees with my idea. But I've never seen it still. Okay, what else could we know about this lizard? Yeah. How would we know its habitat?
Okay, there's.
Yeah. You get a sense of habitat maybe because like, where is this fossil? Where did I find it? Did I find it in ocean rocks? Did I find it in a lake? Did I find it in where? This is actually a lake bottom. This is in Wyoming. Anybody been to Fossil Butte? It's very close to here. It's in southwestern Wyoming. Beautiful, 50-million-year-old or so fossil lake. And there's a really wonderful lizard from that lake. This lizard, I will tell you, doesn't really have swimming adaptations all that special, but there's plenty of lizards today that like jump in the water all the time and swim around. What other things are knowable? Well, yeah, no. What other things are just knowable straight up? Yeah.
It's got a really long tail. That makes me wonder what it's using its tail.
Long tail. I agree with that. I think it's got a long tail. Yeah.
I'd say just in general, the anatomy of the bone structure.
The hard tissue, I want to say hard tissue anatomy as opposed to soft tissue. That's one of the great things and great problems of the fossil record. You want wood, you want teeth, you want shells, you want bones, we got it. Do you want leaves? Do you want tongues? Do you want eyeballs? No. So, what's unknowable about this animal? Use this list, right? The iguana was so easy. What will you never know about this?
It's color.
Color. What else? You can just call it out, guys. What else? Behavior. Probably, right? Behavior's pretty hard. From corpses. Fossils. What else?
Soft tissues.
Soft tissues. I'm gonna start doing this.
Diet.
Genes.
Diet, but that's fun, right? I should say like this is also like maybe shouldn't have been so cute, just right sex. But like different pieces like locomotion, I bet we could probably figure out locomotion with a high degree of confidence. Sex and mating systems, are they polygamous? Do they defend territories? Like, I don't know how you'd ever know. Diet, I think we could maybe kind of figure out pieces of diet, maybe. How about this one? Do you know how cool it would be to do population biology on like the couple hundred triceratops that we've dug up over the years? Yeah, guess what? It's not possible. Isn't that lame? Here's a fun question for you guys, just for a quick distraction. What's unknowable about this one? This is just for fun. Just so you don't think the iguana is perfect. One time I asked this and the students were like, thoughts and feelings. And I was like, that's true, thoughts and feelings. What?
whether or not this is its actual native environment or if it was an introduced species.
On this, sure, but I mean, but is that maybe that's something we can still figure out? I mean,
That is-
I know what you mean. You're right. It's not something that's readily obvious on site, but yeah. How do we know that? Don't even get me started. I don't want to get distracted. Invasive species, or like the first of its kind on a new island or a new continent, happens all throughout Earth history. What if the one that got fossilized was the first one? Isn't that freaky? And we just like, oh yeah, they always live here. I don't know how we'd ever be able to tell you one way or the other, right? So the point I want to make to you guys, though, I wanted to get you thinking about this, because as we go through the tree of life, through vertebrates especially, and you're thinking about these organisms, there's different things we can know and different things we can't know. And that can be really frustrating and also really fun, because it really challenges you as a person, as a scientist, to be really creative, because some of these are probably like get-at-able. You can try to figure them out. People have. So one principle, this is true for all of science. I'm just going to talk about it in terms of paleo, but all of science has this. There's certain like hierarchies of our certainties, right? There's a lot of things about that iguana. You guys might be like, that iguana is green. And I'll be like, yeah, and orange and yellow. And you know what I mean? There's like levels of how much we know something about anything out there in the world. So there's a couple levels here that I think are helpful for you to keep in mind. One of those levels, maybe we can call it that first level, is something that I would say is like inevitable conclusions. If you see this fossil evidence, again, I'm talking about paleo only right now for the hierarchy of certainty. For paleo, what are some inevitable conclusions we can draw? So body fossils, that's something like that lizard skeleton I just showed you. How big is that lizard? How many toes does it have? How many teeth in its jaws? Those are inevitable conclusions we can draw. We can be comfortable and confident in our conclusions. Trace fossils, we're going to talk about in a minute, are kind of things like footprints or eggshells or fossil feces that maybe can tell you things about the behavior and lifestyle of different animals, especially if you can identify them, the trace with the animal that made it. You can learn some things, and I'll show you some inevitable conclusions in a second. But as we go down, you know, you're going to have some loosening of your certainty. You'll have things that are probably like really likely, but you don't know for sure. And there's also speculation. And I think speculation, not just making stuff up, but like informed zoological, in the case of this class, speculation is a really big part of paleontology. It's what drives people to get excited, and it's what drives people to ask better questions. But you can kind of see how like, I'm really confident about this, I'm pretty sure about this, and I don't know about this, but here's what I think. That's a cool thing to keep in mind, that hierarchy as we move through paleo. So here's some examples of a body fossil and a trace fossil. This is a beautiful ichthyosaur. This is a lizard relative. It is a reptile. Fish lizard is what ichthyosaur means. This is a wonderful fossil from Germany. You can see its teeth, its bones, its whatever. But also, because of the really, really wonderful nature of the rock it's preserved in, you can see some soft tissue, like this thing and this thing, that don't have any hard parts in them, but they're still there on the fossil. So an inevitable conclusion for ichthyosaurs are, oh, they have a soft dorsal fin. Like a whale has a soft dorsal fin, or a dolphin has a soft dorsal fin. That's cool. Plenty of fossils don't come with soft tissue, but you can see it in that one. I've never seen an animal like this move in my life, and neither have you. But guess what? On every single continent on this planet, you can find centrally placed left, right feet. And so I am comfortable to say that this dinosaur, this is called Allosaurus, is bipedal, and it has upright stance. It walks like this. It's not on all fours. I've never seen it, but I'm very comfortable to say this is how it moves. So both of these are examples of like inevitable conclusions you'd be really, 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 really in a hard place to argue against, right? Okay. There's also things that we can talk about with these same animals that are, I'm going to call likely interpretations. Multiple ichthyosaurs, especially from Germany, have tiny ichthyosaurs in the posterior parts of their bodies. A likely interpretation of this is that some of these are female ichthyosaurs and they have embryos in their bodies still. Is there any other interpretation potentially? What does that mean? Yeah, maybe that's their food. But if I find 10, 20, 40 ichthyosaur fossils that have this, and there's no sense of the bones dissolving like in stomach acid, and they're always in the same part of the abdomen, maybe I start to be like, no, I think these are babies, not food. But still, interesting to think about, right? So there, you can see this little head right here, and then this little body that's curled up. There's a couple in here. I'm gonna say her because I'm into this. Couple in her rib cage. This one's popping out tail first. Was it dying when it gave birth? Did the gases of its rotting corpse push one of the babies out? I don't know. But I think that is a bunch of babies inside of a mother. So not laying eggs, live birth. These are all, I think, likely interpretations for ichthyosaurs known from fossils. I'm never going to see an ichthyosaur actually get pregnant and give birth, but I think I can be pretty confident about something about their reproductive structures. There's also a lot of things people do to use the modern world to inform fossils. And that's better when we don't just say, this thing looks like this thing, I bet it's the same. It's much better when there's like scientific rigor and it's quantified. But I think you can all agree, like big mouth full of teeth, I've seen that. I think I know what big mouth full of sharp teeth means. I agree. Big plant eater with a small brain and a giant horn on its face. I think I probably understand what's happening here. Almost the exact same body mass. I think I get it. Doesn't mean it's exactly the same, but this horned dinosaur called Styracosaurus, something like a rhinoceros, I think that's an interesting place to start, right? Why does this thing have horns on its face? Here's some animals today that have horns on their face. Here's what they do. Again, we're not saying anything for certain at this hierarchy level. We're just using the modern world to make our inferences. There's things like speculation, which I love. Here's a whole bunch of ichthyosaurs. What color are ichthyosaurs? I don't mind this at all. I don't mind that at all. I don't mind any of these. How are you going to pick? Does everybody get to use whatever colors they want? I'm imagining you all coloring. I think so. I will tell you something really awesome. In like 2019, I think, they were able to get some pigment organelles from some really perfectly preserved German specimens, and everyone they could find was black. And then I'm like, I guess sperm whales are black, and I guess pilot whales are black, and oh, okay, interesting. So these pursuit predators eating squids might be black? Oh, I don't like that. I don't mind that at all, right? But still, you can't say this person's wrong, or this person's wrong, probably. Maybe it's black, but there's stripes. Point is that speculation is a really fun part of this, and you have to be careful to always be thinking about it as like, not just throwing out something crazy because it's funny, but like, what's the informed reason for that potential choice, that potential inference? And so here's a nice ichthyosaur that you guys saw on Tuesday. And so this was that slide talking about paleontology as the study of ancient life in general. And so you've now seen a whole bunch of different beautiful ichthyosaur reconstructions, and they're all known ultimately from things like this, these fossils that we can get up to these bigger picture reconstructions. And so to go from an animal that's alive to this, a lot of things happen, right? A lot of processes must be in place to go from a living, breathing, swimming, in this case, organism, to a specimen that we find and might put in a museum. And so here's an iguana, another one. It's dead. That's sad, but unfortunately, that is the important first step through the fossil process. And so what's going to happen to this iguana? Talk to your neighbors.
Yes. So there's actually this thing here.
All right, so what's going to happen to this little iguana? Yeah, you can just say stuff. I don't have to call people. Decompose, right? What's going to go first? Soft stuff. Usually eyeballs, unfortunately. But yeah, right? So it's going to slowly decompose. And then what? Yeah.
I'm not sure the likelihood of this being a fossil at all, because it looks like it's around a bunch of planty things, which to me implies that it's maybe in a forest.
If you die on the forest floor, it's really probably unlikely that you'll turn into a fossil. We're going to talk about how organisms turn into fossils. The point being is that there are whatever, how many hundreds of billions or trillions of vertebrates right now on this planet. And the very, very, very high likelihood is that almost none of them are actually going to turn into fossils. So that's a very weird geological process where your body actually gets like taken up into the deposition of sediments to become a fossil. This iguana probably isn't going to be a fossil. Unless you guys are really, really, really intense in your wills, you also probably aren't going to become fossils. So the whole process of fossilization has a scientific name to it. There's people who are specialists in this. It's called taphonomy. And it's all the different steps from like, you're dead, to you're in a museum collection with a number written on your forehead. It's a lot of stuff that has to happen in between. Many, 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 many steps in order to being a fossil that people study. And every single one of those steps is unlikely. So all the millions and millions of birds right now flying around North America, not likely any of them are going to be fossilized, right? It's a weird thing to think about. Here's a nice picture of the mammoth from Tuesday, because I thought we were going to take a break, but we went so long that we're not gonna. And so here's where the process starts, right? There are actually really cool paleo people who study this process in the modern world in order to better understand it in Earth's history. So here's a flamingo that just got taken by a hyena. Here's a sheep's body, maybe in some rangeland. There's all these different things that can happen to affect bones themselves, predators, insects. They might bore into you, they might lay their eggs. Maybe that gets rid of your soft tissue, it might mess with your bones. Actual like trampling, sun damage, bleaches and cracks. Sometimes we find fossils from 300 million years ago, and the skull of this beautiful amphibian is all crunchy and flaky. And we can infer with really high confidence, like this thing died and then it was in the sun for like 5 years before it got buried. So like we can see the bone damage from like sun and damage. Then it got buried, then it became a fossil, but I know it was like exposed in this dry riverbed for a while. There's cool things we can figure out like that. And so here's this really fun figure. It's an older figure now, but there's like a living animal, and here's all these different stages of what might happen to it before like there's a bone sticking out of the ground that a scientist will find, and then they'll dig into the hill to find the rest of it maybe. And so here's all of these different ways you can go from like all of those living antelope, let's just say antelope, today, all the way down to all the different, you could think of them as like filters they have to pass through before they get found and collected, put in a museum. So I'm not going to go through this in like tons and tons and tons of detail, because honestly, I think we'll come across these phenomena as we move through class. But I want you guys to see them kind of all up front, how you go from living organisms to fossils. And so this is also a really nice figure. Here's two different things that could happen. This dinosaur keels over. If this dinosaur dies in some river and gets buried really quickly, it might be completely buried. And then you might have it become a fossil. Fossilization is something we'll talk about, where like the actual like microscopically empty parts of the bone get replaced with minerals. And then therefore your bone kind of turns into a rock. And then somebody finds this beautiful whole skeleton. That does happen. It's kind of rare. What's way, way, way more common is that this dinosaur dies, scavenged, eaten, trampled, whatever. And then water or some other process moves the bones around. The animal doesn't stay together. If you guys pay attention when you're walking out in nature, you'll find like a deer hoof by itself on the trail. You'll be like, what? Where's the rest of it? That happens all the time, right? This is much more likely. And so somebody might find a dinosaur bone in a hillside and there only is a femur, the thigh bone, let's say. So these are both like just simple little cartoons. This is much rarer, but obviously much, much, much more informative, much, much more like kind of coveted, right? By scientists and by museums even, to show the public beautiful whole skeletons. And so where, oh, where, oh, where are you going to get buried? This is one of those like, right, fantastic elementary school or middle school diagrams that everybody just loves to look at, labeling different parts of the continents. And so talk to your neighbors for a second. Where are people You don't have to say people. Where are antelope or whatever getting buried on this? Where they're dying everywhere, let's say. Where are they getting buried? Talk to each other about that. Oh yeah, there you go. Where are they not getting buried? Where they are getting buried?
Yeah. Like, how the area, there's a sediment deposition happens somewhere. Yeah. So you can see where, yeah. It's probably, yes, it's seven, so they gave up and now shut it down, show that they are. So the way to bring it up. Yes. Like, opposite was it not, so that's not the same speaker, yeah, so. Our vision is to be. There's so many, I know a lot of the times. Probably.
All right, so what are just your ideas, some general places where stuff's likely to get buried more than maybe average, we could say? Yeah, okay.
Tidal flat.
Tidal flat. I don't know where that is. Yeah. How come? Why do you think?
Cause it'd be very quickly, filled with like sediment and stuff, so it'd be a very burial quickly.
You could get buried in here. There's water moving around. There's like sediment moving around a little bit. Probably nothing violent at a tidal flat, but like, yeah, maybe. Where else? Yeah.
The lake for the same reason.
Lake, same reason. Water, stuff falls into the lake. That includes things like sediment. Where are you unlikely to get buried? If you go in that place. Yeah.
Maybe in the deep ocean.
Deep ocean, maybe, sure. Deep marine. What about up on land? The glacier. You die on top of the glacier? Maybe. How about this? Anywhere up in these hills, anywhere up in those mountains, rocks on mountains are getting like washed down. Mountains are like places where erosion is happening. You're just part of the erosion. Places where sediments are getting built up, and usually, because of water movement, are places where you probably are more likely to get buried. So if you guys want to really be freaked out, the fossil record on land is basically like the fossil record of like streams and lakes. Wow, I wonder what kind of dinosaurs lived up in the mountains. Yeah, me too. That's true, right? Some places are good for probably getting buried. Some places probably really unlikely that you'll get buried. Fun examples though, like someone talked about sand dunes over here. Yeah, sometimes sand dunes collapse. Some of the prettiest fossils you'll ever see are from collapsed sand dunes, but that's not very common. But the point is it's variable, right? Generally, where rocks are being deposited is where you can expect you're more likely to become a fossil. Where rocks are being eroded, like mountains or canyons or whatever, more likely you won't be a fossil because the erosion's happening, not the deposition. This wonderful beach and all these bars, sandbars and gravel bars, those are the river letting off sediment. Because the flow of the water is slowing down, the sediment drops out. Rocks are being deposited here. They're not being deposited in the mountains. They're being eroded in the mountains. And so this is the kind of place you want to be if you want to be a fossil. Most people aren't thinking about being a fossil. Yeah.
When I heard it, or Barry heard it, but it was probably in a video, but someone said, I want to die in a silty lake.
Yeah. People are like kind of joking, sometimes not joking. They're like, I want my family to drop me in the Mississippi in like mid Louisiana because I'm really likely to just get caught and then like covered up. Yeah, that's a good place to get buried. That fossils of now, Louisiana is going to be a great source. Check back in 10 million years or 40 million years. So once you're like past that like death assemblage, right? So like the ecology of what's happening around you, getting scavenged, getting eaten by insects, whatever. You pass into this death assemblage. You don't have to know all these words, by the way. I'm just using this as a framework. To go between like the dead bodies on the landscape to like what becomes a fossil, there's this other little in-between stage, has a fancy name, biostrategy. This is like all the different things that are happening to those bones. So like I said, the river might move the bones around. There's all kinds of ways that like those fluvial processes, those water processes will treat the bones as if they're like logs or rocks and sort them, move them. Sometimes you find a river deposit and all the dinosaur bones are like lined up in parallel because the water like positioned them that way. It's not because they were all going like this. It's because the water movement put them that way. You get these incredible assemblies. This is obviously a painting of a horned dinosaur. This is a big herd from Canada that all died, we think, when they were crossing a river and they drowned. And there's like incredible populations. That's what this is from, of these animals all together. And so there's these circumstances we can use the modern world to understand how different things might have happened. And I think it's very fun and very cool to be like, oh, look, a big herd of horned animals crossing a river and a bunch of them drowned. I see that today in totally different kinds of animals that travel in herds and have horns. So maybe I can make some inferences. It's really cool. Occasionally, burial can be incredibly fast. You won't die and get scavenged and have only your arm end up in the river. Occasionally, you get buried and you are all there. This is a really famous example. Any people know this one? It's a state park in Nebraska. You guys can go there. It's called Ash Fall. This is from when the Yellowstone hotspot, close to all of us, of course, did explode about 11 million years ago. And when it was kind of more near like Buell, one of those eruptions, and the ash cloud fell onto the Great Plains. And so this is a rhinoceros that was living her best life at a watering hole and then got entombed in the ash, like Pompeii style, fell down dead from that Yellowstone volcanic eruption. And what's cool about Ashfall is that there's everybody that was at that watering hole is buried together. So you can go to a barn in Nebraska if you want to and see the old little rim of the watering hole. And almost all of these are rhinoceroses, although there's lots of other animals too. This one's actually a horse that all got buried in a second. So you can imagine if you cared about the time period 11 million years ago, this is a very rare and incredible data source. There's a bunch of really cool biology you can learn from a whole herd of animals all dead at the same time, which is really fun. So we can have a really good picture of what Nebraska looks like 11 million years ago, because when Yellowstone erupted 11 million years ago, it trapped every single one of these animals kind of in place. Do you love that? I love that. Also, this isn't really your Nebraska, is it? There's rhinos, there's elephanty things. What's that? It does look like a giraffe, doesn't it? It's a camel. Giraffes evolve in Asia, and obviously they live in Africa. There's never any giraffes on this continent. But a couple of our camels go like this in North America. That's convergent evolution. Really fun. One of my other favorite factoids, I'm sorry to just give you factoids, is that rhinoceroses for like, I forget the name for it, but female rhinoceroses today have a kind of abnormally high likelihood for having twins because of how their ovaries release eggs. And at Ashfall fossil beds, there's like 6 or 7 twins behind their moms. So it's like, hey, look, even these extinct rhinos had probably that same kind of egg release from their ovaries. That's an inference, but I kind of buy it. Don't you love it? Not easy to do unless you kill everybody at once. So another thing that's really worth you guys knowing about, let me check the time here. Oh yeah, this will be our last thing, are these really special sites that exist all throughout Earth's history. It has a German name, Lagerstätte. It's when, again, the sediments are very fine, teeny tiny bits, not a big debris flow, not a big volcanic eruption, maybe just some kind of thing at the bottom of a lake. And it preserves a lot of stuff all in the same place. And you can get a good sense of really tiny anatomy. And so this is a Jurassic Lagerstätte. You guys might know this animal, Archaeopteryx, one of the first birds, very famous from this location. But next to Archaeopteryx in the same layers are little lizard relatives, little dinosaurs, little pterodactyls, little stingray looking things. And so we're going to come back again and again and again to these things, Lagerstätte, which give us these sort of unparalleled and very rare insights into like the biology of an ecosystem, and especially of like individual organisms. But these are not the norm. They're kind of on the extreme end of awesomeness as opposed to like half of a broken bone. But that whole gamut is what exists in paleo. Okay, I will stop talking for today and we'll pick this back up next week.